brokerage companies are at their lowest level of profitability ever.
The word broke is the first part of brokerage, just for everybody to get that. You talk about it privately, we talk about it publicly. This is the Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered Podcast. Welcome again to the Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered Podcast. I'm your host, Dwiggy Dwiggins, along with Mr. Crazy Uncle Robinson over here.
Yes, sir.
Talk to us about Mr. Russ Cofano, dear friend of ours, one of the greats in the industry, CEO of Collabra Technologies. We had a really lengthy discussion.
He has a 35-year history in the industry. He's done just about everything from being legal counsel for several different companies to a founder to a technologist. I mean, he's done a lot.
Worked in the brokerage space, associations.
He's done everything. Yeah. So he has this sort of long-range view that I find really valuable that you can only have from 35 years in the business and doing a lot of different things.
Yeah.
So we talked to him about CCP, about clear cooperation, about the difference. I love this concept that he has, demand gen versus lead gen. You will absolutely want to perk your ears up for that part. The portals, how that could change and be different. Some of the additional legal issues that could be happening for the industry. We covered a ton of ground. So thoughtful.
That's awesome.
You're going to dig it. Put it in your ears, kids.
Russ, welcome to the podcast. It has been way too long for us to not have you on here. For viewers and listeners, just a kind of a prerequisite to this, Russ is a very dear friend. We've had many a cocktail talking about industry stuff at conferences. We see each other often, and Russ is, as you're going to learn, one of the smartest people in our business. He has worn a lot of hats over his career in the space. Actually, it's probably a good segue, Russ. We should probably just dive into that. Why don't we give everybody a little bit of your background so they have context? Because you've had, if I remember correctly, you've run association, brokerage, been at portals, general counsel. Like, you've done kind of everything. I think I've done a lot, but you've done way more than I have. So let's start with that. Tell everybody kind of your historical perspective when you got into the space, the positions you've been in, and then all the way up to where you are today. And then we'll jump into some rapid fire. So,
well, first, thanks to you and Keith for having me on. I'm an avid listener, and most of the time you're on when I'm in the gym working out, and as opposed to some other industry podcasts, I never try to hit my phone when I'm listening to you guys. So it's
thank you.
It's always a great listen. It's always a great listen.
Awesome.
We're happy to be on the treadmill with you.
Yeah, there you go. So I, been prepping for this. I look back at the calendar, and I first got into the business in 1989. So it's been 35 years. I can't believe it because I don't think of myself as being that old.
Did you start when you were 11?
But your point, James, I have seen a lot of things, and I think from a perspective standpoint, watching the industry over the last 35 years has given me a kind of a unique perspective. So, and I'm a perfect example of great plans don't go the way you think they do, and so I'm a lawyer by sort of education, and I got into the industry through the legal avenue, never intending to be in organized real estate or in real estate specifically. I wanted to be a hotel developer. I like building things, and I love nice hotels. I thought, what a cool thing to do, to build hotels and have enjoyable experiences for people. And yet I got into real estate law in 1989 when interest rates were not great. The development cycle was not great. So I found myself at a law firm that had a relationship with the organized real estate. And one of my first jobs was being the legal hotline lawyer for the Washington Association of Realtors.
Oh, God.
It was not what I wanted to do. But I had no choice if I wanted a paycheck. Answering questions from realtors who had gotten into SHIT and didn't want their broker to know. They were calling me to get them out of crap. But what I learned from that, one, I got an under the covers view of real estate, really on the front lines, because I was helping agents that were in challenges, right?
Yeah.
And I also realized I really took a liking to agents. They were, for the most part, glass half full people, because you have to be in this business, right? You have to have a positive attitude.
Yeah.
And I was enamored with, I fell in love with the industry. So completely out of left field, I'm now in this business. And again, serendipity being was what it was. My mentor partner at the law firm passed away shortly after I started my career. And I was the only guy that really worked with him. And suddenly I became him in Washington. So I represented the State Realtor Association, local realtor associations, and MLSs and brokerage companies at a pretty young age. And that really started me down this path. Led to the internet. So I was very involved with sort of the beginnings of real estate listings on the internet. I was involved with RIN. I was a beta tester. If you remember RIN, Realtor Information Network.
Yeah.
Beginnings of Real Select and at Realtor.com.
Right.
I started helping MLS's license data to Realtor.com and Cyber Homes and Microsoft Home Advisor and all those names from the past.
That's wild.
You've been in a while if you know these names.
It really dates you, right?
Yeah.
But I gained this understanding of sort of organized real estate, data, IP stuff. And I eventually left private practice in the late 90s, launched a startup company. We almost, I learned a great lesson, never forget it, which is timing is something that you cannot control, and it can either kill you or help you survive. And our timing was not great. So built some great technology, great application, but our timing was not great. So eventually died. I went back into sort of traditional real estate, being general counsel for John L. Scott, which is a great company.
Great company.
Great company. Lennox is a great operator.
Good operators.
Helped them through the Great Recession. And I will tell you this, I learned more at John L. Scott about this business than in anything I've ever done, because I essentially helped them through the Great Recession.
Yeah.
And, you can cover a lot of ills when business is good, but when business sucks, you really uncover, it's open kimono time. And, and you see all the warts, right? So I really learned how big brokerages operate and where they can be successful and where their soft underbelly is in that period of time. And thankfully, we weathered the storm, unlike some other folks. And John L. Scott is going to eventually celebrate its 100th anniversary as a brokerage company. And I think that's really cool. I think
Lennox is a great guy. I shared a car with him back to the airport at an event about a month ago, and we were in the car for like 35 minutes just chatting about all sorts of stuff. His positivity is infectious. Like he just looks at the world through this lens of we can do. Yeah. He's just a really neat guy.
I've never met anybody in the business that is more positive than Lennox Scott. Never.
I would agree.
So after that, I decided I'd had enough lawyering. Still was very interested in real estate data, and so I decided that I wanted to go run an MLS. And I ended up running a state realtor association. So go figure how that worked, right? Not the plan, but it's what happened. And I eventually landed in Columbia, Missouri, running the Missouri Realtor Association, and spent 3 years reconstructing that organization, working with an amazing leadership group that really wanted change. They didn't just they walked the talk, right? And we did some really, really innovative things there. We could talk about that later if you want to.
Sure.
And then 2014 happened, and some big changes at Realtor.com. Our friends Errol Samuelson moved over to at that time the dark side, Zillow. And left a hole in their industry group, and so I went over to Realtor.com to head up industry for them and sort of continue the Realtor.com voice. Unbeknownst to me, I joined as they were finalizing an acquisition by News Corp.
Sure.
So within 90 days after I joined, I was hired by Steve Berkowitz and ended up working for Ryan O'Hara, who's a great guy. Ryan's still a friend, and didn't last all that long at Realtor. Things change. I mean, Realtor.com is a very, very different organizational, and its relationship with the Realtor Association is very different than it was in the early teens. Very different. And
Sure.
And so I wasn't necessarily aligned with the changes that were going on. So I moved on, and by happenstance, I had met a great guy at Realtor.com by the name of Glenn Sanford. So after I left Realtor.com, Glenn called me up and said, "Hey, I've got this little thing called EXP," and this was early days, and EXP was still is headquartered in Bellingham, Washington, I'm in Seattle, and I'm going, who is this company and who is this guy, right? But he laid out his vision, and I got really intrigued. Again, another really positive thinking guy is Glenn Sanford.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so,
Tech
Glenn's
nerd,
a visionary guy.
Yeah.
I think he would acknowledge he probably isn't, operations and things like that aren't necessarily maybe his strongest suit. And so they started hitting a growth curve and had bootstrapped the company up to that point in time. And so I came on as president and general counsel of EXP World Holdings, and with the job to make it a big boy company and uplist to NASDAQ and do all those things. And great experience, doubled the size of the company in a year, massive growth. Talk about the phrase of building the bike as you're riding it down the street or the airplane or whatever, not crashing it. That was the time at EXP. Again, learned a lot about an alternative model.
So I have a photo of Glenn and me and a bunch of people at an RE bar camp in 2010, and he's like in the back kind of smiling, and Glenn, we know each other really well. He was such a tech nerd, and I love him dearly. And it was funny because it was way before EXP was anything of what it is today. And you go back 14 years and you're like, look at some of the people you knew then, and then where they've become. Let's do this real quick, Russ. I want to ask a couple of these rapid fire questions, because then I'll segue you into sort of what you're working on as well in the current venture. So just real quick, we do this with all of our listeners. Your favorite book or podcast that you're listening to or reading or whatever that you think people would want to do. We have a list on our website of these for people to go check them out.
So I'm an avid podcast listener. I would say, Real Estate Unfiltered would be the number one.
Oh. Yes, it is. Damn straight.
I'm an introspective guy. I try to get in my own head, which is a scary thing sometimes. And there's a podcast by the name of Hidden Brain. Verdante it's an amazing podcast. It makes you think. It's legit stuff. Highly recommend it. So Hidden Brain.
That's a good one. I listened to that one.
Keith?
Okay. If you could have lunch with one person, current or historical, who would it be and why?
Well, I've been asked this question before in other podcasts, and my answer is always the same, which is Walt Disney. I grew up in Southern California, and Disneyland has a special place in my heart, and I would love to go back and see his vision, because it's one of the most durable brands and experiences today globally. It's an incredible thing that emanated from one guy. Yeah. But I will say that my answer today is different, because I would have lunch with my mom and dad. My dad passed about 4 years ago, and my mom passed about 9 months ago. And I think often about the fact that I cannot talk to them. So
yeah.
Good answers.
I have a question for you, and then we'll dive in here. Did you ever do the private tour of Disneyland where you pay the person to take you on?
No, I'd love to though.
So a friend of mine did it as a birthday gift, and you did on the train, and we stopped at Walt Disney's like specific spots and went to these private places that he has on the campus that no one knows about. It's really expensive. I can't afford it, but somebody else did, and Well, I will tell you that the tour also lets you go on all the rides at the front. You can just stay on the rides. I have never been able to go to Disneyland since because you just stayed on Space Mountain like 5 times. Like it was crazy. All right, let's dive into some stuff here because you've had the background, obviously, for everybody to hear. You've been in the space and have sat in more chairs than anybody that I know. So let's do this. Let's go over a few things in the industry, and then I want to go deep into what you're working on. But we'll start with industry stuff. So as general counsel and obviously working in the space as much as you have, I know you've been vocal on the issues that the industry is facing. What are some of the things that's worrying you as a lawyer and that the industry is doing after the NAR settlement? Keith and I have been very vocal on our stuff, but I want you to talk about what you see as a lawyer. Like, what are the practices that concern you? What do you think are issues? Like, give people some thoughts on that from the perspective of a lawyer.
Well, again, going back to my hotline days, agents are going to do things sometimes path of least resistance without thinking a lot. And what has happened, and you guys have talked about it, especially you, James, in some of the things that you've said on stage and online. The legal industry, people take. I'm a lawyer, and I look at the legal industry with there's some good things about it, and some shitty things about. Pardon me. About it.
No, you're fine. That's PG-13. Yeah. Keith and I are way worse. Okay. You're good.
Way worse.
But lawyers are business people, just like everybody else. It's not. They're not. They're not in an altruistic thing. They get up and they want to make money, just like real estate people, just like everybody in business, right? And what this whole thing has created is a bullseye on the real estate industry, and there is going to be more litigation. We obviously have not seen the final shoe to drop from justice. There's going to be more dropping from justice. Interesting to see how the election will play out on that, but I don't think justice is done regardless of who ends up being president in November.
Agree with that.
I think that the legal industry understands that they can make a lot of money looking at this business because of the nature of this business and it being made up of people that are very creative and very entrepreneurial, but not always long-term thinking. And I think we, as an industry, have some real issues to deal with at a time when, and I'm happy to riff on this a little bit, when, especially the CCP conversation, it's highlighting some things that have nothing to do with CCP. And so we're not done with litigation at all. And I think we need, we're going to have the industry continue to push the envelope because that's what the industry does. But this time, as opposed to years past, there's people watching. And if they push it too far, there will be legal ramifications.
Give me specifics. Give me specifics. What's concerning you?
The fact that agents are going to find it more difficult to manage their duties to their clients in terms of gaining commissions, and so. I think that we're already seeing some agents that, for example, think that they can modify buyer agency agreements or buyer representation agreements to increase commissions. Well, you can't do that, right? And so,
do you know that there's actual lawyers for representing associations that are advising people that you can?
That's crazy. I would. So I would go out to on the limb and say that that's malpractice, right? To be advising in that context.
Russ, how much of it is? I think, and maybe I'll say what I think, and hopefully you disagree because podcasts are more interesting when people disagree. Sure. But it's also okay if you agree because it makes me feel really smart. I think agents just want to know what they're really good at. In my experience, is helping people. Right? That's That's what they show up for. That's what drives them. That's what motivates them. They happen to monetize that love of helping people through the sale of a home. That's how they get paid, but it's not like what they do is don't sell homes. They shepherd people's emotions through a really stressful transaction.
Totally.
And they just want a good answer, right? And some of this is, I think there's just a lot of leadership in different organizations that are giving agents bad information. And it's tough. Like, imagine, look, they're not attorneys. They don't want to be. They care deeply about their clients. They're just trying to help them. They go ask somebody, what should I do? Somebody's like, yeah, you can totally do that. Well, then, of course, they're going to go out into the marketplace and do that.
Yeah.
Like, how do we get the leadership on the same page and with a real understanding so that the right answers can get to the agents? Because I don't think they're pushing the envelope because they want to push the envelope. I think they're just trying to get answers to how to service their clients.
Completely.
Well, that wouldn't have happened 20 years ago, Keith, because 20 years ago, brokerage companies had more power to be leaders. What the industry's done over the last 20 years is they've essentially walked away from leadership through business models that have given individual agents and teams essentially ownership of the industry. I mean, and that was not the case before, and now it is the case, and it's having a cascading impact not just on this issue, but on the economics of the industry, and things like CCP, because the bottom line is.
Sorry to interrupt, but so is this a situation where, basically the parents are just letting the kids have candy for dinner? Is that kind of what's going on? They're scared to resist.
It's a valid point.
What they think the agents want, and so they're just giving them what they want.
Yeah, because the agents will leave.
Absolutely, right? Absolutely, and their models are not set up for it, right? So people look at the two most impactful models of the 21st century, Keller Williams and EXP. Those models are not. They are
it's a little oversight.
They are a low oversight, heavy body count. They contribute to an overabundance of agents in this business that we all agree we have too many. That never used to be the case. And so,
although an interesting aside is that I'd say EXP has been a forerunner in leading through this and trying to shape how their agents are approaching things and doing things. I mean, they've been a front runner, not they have.
Leo's
not been
done a very good job.
Yeah,
Leo has been very upfront.
No question. No question.
Yeah.
But I've sat in that seat.
Yeah, that's true.
And I can tell you can speak from the mountaintops. And we will do what they want.
Yeah. No, it's a fair comment because like, even if you were thinking about it, I'm putting words in the mouth here, but out of 76,000 agents at EXP or whatever the number is, there's probably only 10,000 of them that do much of any of the business, and the other 60,000 of them come in to do one deal at some point in time during the year and haven't read a single damn thing, don't know about any of the changes. And that's not an EXP problem. I'm talking industry as a whole, but using your example. So I have this question. I'll go a little further. I personally feel like NAR is stuck in a spot where they're trying to not upset the membership either, because they've got all of this anger towards them.
It seems like it's working. No one seems to be mad at NAR right now. So
well, but my comment is like they're stuck in this weird spot because they don't want to upset the industry. But I find it hard to believe that they don't know that modifying buyer rep agreements up because the seller is offering more money is literally not the spirit of that settlement. Like, I just find that to be complete nonsense. And will create steering, literally, which we all know and have seen is happening all over the U.S. right now. In fact, I made this comment on stage yesterday. I said, I don't think there really was a lot of steering at all prior to August 17th because the model was such where you didn't really need to. And now I'll tell you that I think the steering's occurring all over everywhere because agents aren't being trained properly. They're being given really bad advice by, as I just mentioned, some general counsel as well. And it's creating just a shit show of stuff out there. I saw a post the other day. Agent was offering a $50,000 bonus to the agent that would bring the buyer. I'm like, that's literally steering.
Yeah.
Like, You can't pay him the bonus. That's not actually that's literally trying to create steering. So
right. Well, and it all revolves around economics. We know that, right? It is. People want to deliver good service, to your point, Keith, and they want to be paid for it, right? And we've got an industry that we've got a brokerage companies, and I'm making a large generalization, so certainly this doesn't apply to everybody.
Sure.
But brokerage companies are at their lowest level of profitability ever.
Yeah.
And
the
we're
word
going to
broke
see
is the first part of brokerage, just for everybody to get that.
And we're going to see industry economics continue to compress, and that's going to force people into doing things that maybe, from a legal standpoint, we just might not want to see.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Keith. No,
Me?
go, Keith.
Okay.
Go. Yep.
So how much of this is the chaos of change? And how much of this, anytime you have external change that's pushed into a marketplace, it's chaos for a little while everyone tries to figure out the lay of the land and how to approach this. Are we in the third inning of the chaos and this will normalize in 6 more months, or are we just here and it's just going to be like this for a while?
Well, so every cloudy day eventually has sunshine. So on the glass half full side, I think it's an amazing time to be in this business. So all the challenges aside, the opportunities, they've been sort of in a pressure cooker to this point. And nobody would have said, oh, bring on all this crappy stuff for the industry. But the pressure cooker now has blown the lid off. And there's immense opportunity. And I think we're early on, Keith. It's not a 3-month, 6-month deal. I think we're going to see some really interesting things. We can anticipate some are going to be unanticipated.
Right.
But there's never been a time, for example, Stefan Swanepoel is coming out with his opportunities report. I can't wait to read it because he's a super smart guy. And the corollary to the danger report, I buy that there's opportunities, but with opportunity, there needs to be some really smart leaders. And I think we have some leadership void. I don't think NAR is that entity anymore. They used to be, but I don't think they are.
No, they've got a lot of changes to do. Although I will say, I've been talking with Nakia quite a bit. She's starting to get her hands around it. So I'm excited to see what she's going to do. I think that it would be interesting to watch the staffing hires that she does to see sort of how she takes that. I got 2 questions, Russ. I want to ask just your stance, and then I really do want to dive into some of the cool shit you're doing, because we've got plenty of time to talk about all these other issues. But the 2 that I want to make sure, I want to hear your perspective on: cooperative compensation. I want to get your thoughts on that, and then you've mentioned CCP twice now. So let's talk about those 2 things, and then we'll get into this new venture that you're working on. So what's your take on cooperative compensation, knowing the current structure things are now, and then the CCP?
I've been consistent on this for a long time, and I remain consistent on it, which is I think the sooner the industry can walk away from cooperative compensation, it will help us. I could use an anatomical analogy here. Keith, I know you're laughing because I know you know where I'm going on that. But the sooner we do that, then we can start feeling good again. So cooperative compensation needs to be out of our vocabulary. That's easy. CCP.
Just in case someone doesn't know, CCP stands for
Clear Cooperation
Policy.
I know, but
and basically just the policy that requires you to put the listing in the MLS basically within a day of putting the property up for public promotion.
So generally speaking, and I haven't, it's not my place to say it should be this or it should be that. I personally think some element of the philosophy behind Clear Cooperation, which is getting all listings in a marketplace, I think is good for the industry, good for consumers, good for the industry. I think what we're seeing today is a function of the fact that brokerage companies are sick, and this is economics need to play. And so my concern is, regardless of the decision around whether to keep, modify, abolish, whatever CCP is, if we don't deal with the underlying economic issue of sick brokerage companies in an industry, the industry is eating itself from inside. And I believe that there needs to be strong brokerage entities, unless the industry completely morphs into something else. I believe there needs to be strong brokerage entities, and that's the biggest thing I've got concern about. So CCP will work itself out. I think it will exist in some fashion because that makes sense. But I think the underlying sort of energy that's causing so much discussion on both sides today is a much more difficult challenge for the industry.
I said this, by the way, I don't know where the hell I said it. I've been on so many damn things. I said the only reason this is an issue right now is because brokerages are broke. It wasn't a topic 2 years ago when everybody was making a bunch of money. It's an issue because everyone's trying to figure out how to make money from this few amount of transactions occurring. That's the fundamental core of it.
Yep.
And the arguments, and I've been very public about this, but the arguments for why to change it are just nonsense. Like there's no logic in them at all. In fact, that's kind of this conversation yesterday, like, the seller should have the ability to opt out of having their home on the MLS. I'm like, it's called seller informed consent. And like almost all MLSs have had that. There's a form. Here's 25 of them I've got in my inbox. Like, it's just amazing to me, the lack of education on a lot of these subjects. But your opinion is CCP in its philosophy is the right approach.
There needs to be the listings need to be somewhere, right? That creates an efficient system that I don't think we want to walk away from.
And we spent 20 years building it.
Right. And quite frankly, I think we have some very well, we can get into this in the conversation about what we're up to. We have some very financially powerful entities called portals that would be waiting in the wings for that sort of
opportunity if the industry fragmented. Yeah. I said that the other day too, and everybody thought I was crazy. So well, let's talk about what you're doing then. So let's switch this over. So give just a very quick, like high level, Collabra Sphere Builder, right? Sphere Builder is a product of Collabra Technology. I guess. Yeah,
that's correct.
So give us just a quick overview. You've been all these seats and now you've got this new tech company you're doing. Tell us a little bit overview on that. And then I do want to dig into this advertising and portals and everything else. So
I became CEO of Collabra about 3 years ago and with a mission to create a new product. Collabra is not a startup company. It's more of a legacy company. And I kind of look at it as a restart. But we evaluated sort of back to what my first startup, timing and opportunities. And we saw a timing and opportunity around the fact that most real estate agents are great salespeople. They're not great marketers. And marketing is a different discipline than sales. Right. That's why in any company you have a sales department and a marketing department. They work synergistically with each other to generate business, but they do different things. And we didn't see great marketing performance by agents. And so we said, maybe we build a marketing application and do things better. We evaluated some things that were going on outside of real estate because we all know that real estate tech tends to lag the rest of the technology. By a couple, millennia.
Generation. Stop it.
And so we came up with the concept of Sphere Builder, which has sort of two parts to it. One, a data and analytics piece that helps agents understand the power of their digital presence. And then two, leverages the philosophy of demand generation as opposed to lead generation. And helping agents understand that there's a funnel. The funnel is not made up all of sales activities. The top of funnel is more demand gen than lead gen. And there's a way to be effective at both, which will generate, in theory, because it happens in every other business. So why should it not happen here? Sure. More productive output on the sales side. And so we also saw at the time digital advertising taking off, and there was an incumbent company in the space that had been acquired by another incumbent company, and we saw some tea leaves that said, the industry may not view that incumbent in the same way they had before, and if we
I feel like we're talking in code. What are you trying to say, Russ?
Well, HomeSnap was acquired by
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there we go.
And so we looked at that and we said, there's going to be some changes.
That's the lawyer coming through, Keith, where he's being very politically correct.
If we built something that delivered similar value, then there might be a place for us, and that's what we did.
So let's go dive deep into that then. Well, Keith, you had a question. Sorry, jump in.
Well, you and I've talked before about this demand gen versus lead gen component, and I perhaps because I'm a Neanderthal, but I had never really thought of it in the way until you explained it to me in the way that you did. So can you unpack this? What's the difference between demand gen and lead gen?
Demand gen is about creating awareness, buzz, perspective, that leads into capturing prospects. And it's like this. If you were looking for a car and you said, what brand do I want to go look at?
Mm-hmm.
And you walk into the BMW dealership, you're walking in with a perspective about what BMW stands for.
Right.
Before you ever think about buying, the Series 7 or whatever it might, you're walking in with a perception about the brand.
Right.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And demand generation is high level, high funnel, building awareness and perspective about the value of the brand, right?
The ultimate driving machine.
Talking about personal brands and they conflate personal brand with a logo, right? And that's not even it. It's about what is that consumer going to already be thinking about when they engage with you in a lead gen activity. So, for example, when an agent puts a sold rider on a for sale sign, was sold by Keith Robinson at
Hell
Next.
Yeah, it was.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That is demand gen.
Right.
You are if you go through an area and there's 5 for sale signs out and your sold riders on all of them.
Right.
What does that tell consumers in that community?
You're
the bomb, man.
Yeah.
You sell houses, right?
Yeah.
But you're not asking for anybody's business. You're generating awareness about who you are. So
it reminds me when we were talking about it, and this is just like my personal example of the difference. And if this helps frame it up for people, I do these economic posts from time to time on social media, right? And no one it gets 2 likes and 0 shares. No one cares, right? And so for a while I was like, why do I keep doing this? No one gives a shit. But I would see people at events and they would constantly tell me, oh, thanks so much for
all the time
the economic updates that you're doing, right? And to me, that's an example of demand gen versus lead gen. It doesn't seem like it's working, right? No one's reaching out to me saying, whatever business venture I'm working on, they're not reaching out to me saying, hey, I want whatever you're selling, right? But they are reading it. They are getting value from it. They are having an experience with it. And it doesn't have that feedback loop. And so it doesn't get reinforced as well, but it is working and you've got to keep doing it.
Well, it's a great example of I can't go anywhere without people calling me Dwiggy.
Thanks. Shout out, Stefan.
Demand gen. Thanks, Stefan.
You demanded a nickname.
If I could wave one wand over the agent populace, it would be that getting the feedback of likes or comments on social posts doesn't mean that it's not working.
Right.
But they're so keyed into, did I get a lead that I can call? Right. And it's like, it's where we are really starting a thought leadership approach to this, because it's something the industry doesn't understand, but they need to understand because it's so powerful.
Well, and you're fighting against human nature, right? Human nature requires usually that feedback loop of this is working, do it more. This is working, do it more, right? And so asking someone to turn that off for just a minute and say, or reorienting or reframing what the feedback loop is, right? Finding that someone saying they appreciated your economic update, that's actually the feedback loop that you're getting, right? So
we do,
identifying.
like Keith and I can see stats on our pod. We get a lot of traffic to the pod, but there's, to the comment you made, Russ, there's comments. We never read them because usually they're talking something negative about us, which is always fun.
It's kind
Keith
of fun.
likes to read them.
I do.
But
So
the amount of people that walk up to us,
keep posting.
people that walk up to us randomly are like, "Hey, we love your podcast." It's like, it's actually it's out there. Talk to us about this agent or brokerage advertising, like given the dominance of the portals. Like, is there a big path here?
So here's where we deliver value. We have an advertising platform, and an agent can go into our platform and basically create a fully optimized ad that goes out to Meta, that's Facebook and Instagram, Google or Bing. I think our record is 31 seconds. We had an agent go from the time they clicked on our application to the time they paid, 31 seconds. The average agent is in there for a couple minutes. And we basically say this: we're not anti-portal, right? Portals fill a need, right?
Sure.
And that's an important piece of the equation, right? But agents need to understand that portals are the newspaper of the 21st century. And back, I know you guys go back this far, before the internet and newspapers were essentially held consumer eyeballs. It's a lot of power. And every time an agent advertises with a portal, they may be getting some personal branding out of it, but I guarantee you they're delivering on the portal brand. They're building power in that brand. And I can, I don't have any secrets here, but I read what I read, and the fact that Andy Florence is spending $1 billion on a marketing campaign for Homes.com, he's not doing it to just spend $1 billion. He wants to get paid back more than $1 billion to pay for that advertising campaign, and that's going to come from agents, right? It's going to come from the industry, just like it has in the other business models they've done. So our perspective is, if you want to do portal advertising, fine, just know what you're doing, but don't disregard your ability to leverage platforms that have billions of people associated with them, that you're not building somebody else's brand, you're building your brand, right?
Yeah.
And I will tell you this: Zillow came out this week with if you haven't read it, you should. A seller. I know you're going to talk to some folks at Zillow coming up, but they came up with a report, and it was a seller survey, and in 2018, 6% of sellers first found their agent on social media or in Google search. In 2024, 14% of sellers first found their agent in social or search. So more than double the numbers. One out of every 6 sellers is finding their agent in their first contact on social media or in search. And so it is a viable strategy and channel, and we've made it really easy.
Yeah. Well, that's a really interesting comment, because I think that, the hard part we're dealing with is everybody doesn't have a lot of money right now with just the lack of business in the space. So they're having to decide where to place everything. I'll ask one last question, then Keith will wrap us up here with our final question we do. Just real quick, where do you think AI plays in this? In this, are we going to get to a spot where the ads are so targeted and specific that it can read Russ's mind and knows when you're thinking about buying real estate and throws James Twiggins right there in front of you? Like, are we going to get there? I'm kind of joking, but facetiously at the same time, like, are we moving towards a reality of incredibly specific targeted advertising?
We are. We're going to get, so it's like, are we going to get to general AI? Well, yeah, I don't think so. But are we going to make significant progress into what AI can do? Clearly, it's going to have an impact on advertising. I think the word intelligent advertising is going to start becoming a norm. And what we do, for example, is we're gathering tremendous amount of data from all the ads that are placed. And we're going to be putting machine learning around that data so we can tell an agent not just, hey, place an ad, but you should place an ad on Monday morning with this kind of content.
Smart.
To this general group demographic, because that's going to get the most impressions. And back to your point, Keith, this is what it's about. This is about getting impressions, not necessarily clicks or leads, impressions and awareness, and broad reach, right? Yeah. That's how the advertising world works. And so we're going to get a lot smarter, and it's going to be companies like us and others that are in this space that
do it.
We're going to be able to help agents out be smarter.
I love it. That's going to be so much more cost effective for everyone. All right. Keith's got a question he asks all of our guests when we wrap up the show.
Russ, if you were an agent or a brokerage, what's the one thing you'd implement today to help your business and prepare it for 2024 and 2025?
Well, I'll take the broker side, because there are really two questions. So I'll just focus on the broker side. If I'm a brokerage leader today, I am one, talking to as many smart people. I'm going to read Stefan's opportunity report when it comes out. Plug for T3 because that's a great organization. And I'm going to talk to as many people to understand where the opportunities are. And then I'm going to become maniacal about understanding the pain points of my agents and delivering on those specific pain points, and everything else can go aside. Because the value proposition and I think brokerage companies are going to be able to at least have a fighting chance of dealing with this profitability crisis by that kind of approach. Unfortunately, a lot of brokerage companies are trying to be all things to all people. They're not focused on what they're doing. They're delivering things their agents don't need or don't want. And that just leads to not a great P&L.
Yeah. It's a good comment. Great feedback. Russ, thanks for being here, my friend. As always, incredible information. Love hearing your thoughts on everything. Congrats on the new venture as well. We'll put a link in our show notes for people to check out the company and the products you guys are doing. And hopefully when we have you back on, the industry's a little calmer. So
yes, please.
Hey, you guys do a great job. I really want to, your podcast and the breadth of people you've had on here is awesome. Keep up the great work.
Thanks, buddy.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Russ.
it. Talk to you
later.
Yep. You don't want to let Keith down, do you? Hit subscribe, and not only will you never miss an episode of this podcast, but you'll also never make Keith sad. He's easily entertained.